record yesterday's session. So I'm going to be really sure to remember today to hit record. And we are about to do this evening go over the characteristics for God's teachers. Amazing section, really foundational. Read it many times, especially the first portion. This is a long section, 20 some slides there. We're not trying to finish them all in one session. I'd rather we strive for understanding rather than for speed and reach some page. So we'll go through it, and if we need to, we'll pick it up again next weekend with the remaining portion. Okay, and just to remind you what that looks like, we've done the first three sections already through to what are the levels of teaching, and now we're in what is really the fourth section, what are the characteristics of God's teachers. David, whenever you're ready.
The surface traits of God's teachers are not at all alike. They do not look alike to the body's eyes. They come from vastly different backgrounds. Their experiences of the world vary greatly, and their superficial personalities are quite distinct. Nor at the beginning stages of their functioning as teachers of God have they as yet acquired the deeper characteristics that will establish them as what they are. God gives special gifts to his teachers because they have a special role in his plan for atonement. Their specialness is, of course, only temporary, set in time as a means of leading out of time. These special gifts, born in the holy relationship toward which the teaching-learning situation is geared, become characteristic of all teachers of God who have advanced in their own learning. In this respect, they are all alike. All differences among the sons of God are temporary. Nevertheless, in time, it can be said that the advanced teachers of God have the following characteristics.
And then that leads into the detailed characteristics in a minute. So two things here that might seem paradoxical. One is there are beginning stages of someone's functioning as a teacher of God, and then there are advanced stages. It's a progressive model, beginning, growing, acquiring deeper characteristics. That'll be the focus of this section, is the deeper characteristics. The superficial characteristics really don't matter, whether one uses Zoom or uses face-to-face. There are probably many sports coaches that use the sport field as a method of teaching their students. Those are all superficial, different backgrounds. But what will focus on is these deeper characteristics. You should very much think in terms of yourself acquiring these deeper characteristics. And where do they come from, these deeper characteristics? They're gifts that are given because of your role. When you function as a teacher of God, your function requires these gifts, and they are given. It's only temporary. We're not using this as a hierarchy to separate from other people, but it's just that the gifts are needed now to function now. Eventually, these gifts everyone acquires. In this respect, everyone is all alike. They all will eventually acquire these gifts. So that you can sense that from the beginning stages to the advanced stages, acquiring the deeper characteristics, there's a growth process here. And what the whole point of it is as a means of saving time and leading out of the ancient prison we referred to previously, the ancient prison that has us repeating the past again and again, going back to the separation, going back to the desire to be different from what you truly are. That's a loop, a time loop. The whole purpose here is to escape from that time loop. And these deeper characteristics, these gifts from God, are helpful to function in that way. Susie?
Oh, I'm not muted.
No.
I completely understand the distinction, Jonica. I just think it's not lost on me for some reason that they use the word specialness when that word in the course is no. You know what I mean? So I understand how they're using it. I understand the distinction, but I find I don't know what the word would be.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Sort of. Because we spent so much time
Good.
talking about not being special, and that's all.
We did. So maybe with throttle back from specialness being never any good and saying we can think in those terms, but at the same time, we have to realize this is just temporary. Someone is stepping up to the plate temporarily, but that has no significance outside of time. Heather, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I think it actually means a specialist. So it's a specialist that somebody's already had this experience and knows how it looks, knows how it comes out. And so they assign you that one because you already know and have been through it. So you're assigned to a specialist, but it's not specialness.
I love Heather. Thank you. That's
Heather, maybe you could rewrite that.
yeah, right. I'll just scratch it out and put. I like it. It covers both plates. It allows us to leave specialness in that category of confusion of a hierarchy of people and specialist for the people that just acquire skills. These are abilities, characteristics that they acquire. I thank you. That really works for me. Julie Staley, you had your hand up.
Yeah, this is fun to talk about this. And what came to my mind was that to me, like the courses, kind of forewarning or whatever about specialness has to do with relationships. And it also has to do with us assigning a role to that relationship.
Right.
And that's not what they're talking about here. They're not, we're not doing any of the assigning here. We're not assigning any special things anywhere. And so to me, there's a difference.
Mhm.
Jesus is talking about the gifts and the teachers and things like that versus us assigning this to a person, a relationship, or whatever. I feel like it's a different thing when we do it versus a description of gifts.
That's helpful, Julie. Thank you. I see what you're saying now. It's a special role. It's not a special person. Julie C., you had your hand up?
Yeah, this reminds me of something I didn't say yesterday. There was a line in a reading yesterday that talks about bringing light to the darkness. And I have like a a contrary, like, oh, wait, we're not supposed to do that because we're supposed to bring darkness to the light.
Right.
But kind of like Julie was just saying, I told myself a story about what that meant. And the story was that, well, a person would go into the darkness so that they can relationally connect with someone, and then that someone and their darkness gets brought to the light. But it's weird for me sometimes how the course will say something that on the face of it goes totally against, what they've told us to not invest in. So
Yeah, I found that before too, and oftentimes it was because I didn't see the distinction myself. I had to look deeper than just simply which words can we use and which words can we not use with phrases. There was always, but I didn't see it at first. My mind just said, "Oh, inconsistent problem." Yeah, Richie, you had your hand up.
With me, wherever I was, I never felt like I belonged there. And also, I guess I'm into feelings now more than intellect. When I hear other people share, I it's like um I you said it yesterday and I said it to someone today, but I felt like I was a phony because I was quoting you. Not without I didn't put your name to it. But you said it is the destination of all relationships to become holy.
Yes.
And that I've been attempting to do that all my life, but I never felt I had anything to offer. All I had was I was like almost like a contrarian,
Mhm.
or I had this perennial chip on my shoulder.
Mhm.
Now I know here everything that I've learned through you guys has helped me and has helped and it's changed me.
Mhm.
I have absolutely no idea where I'm going, but I know I belong here.
Yeah, nice. You belong
And
here, Richie.
so that's what I'm getting. I don't. It's like I had said it yesterday. There was a spiritual waiting room inside of me,
Yes. I like,
and you guys opened it up somehow. That's what I have to say, and I don't even know if it has anything to do with tonight's topic. It makes it's a part of I guess the word would be conversion
yeah.
that
Um,
I'm experiencing.
I think we'll find out that it probably does. Let's listen for it. Thank you,
Thank
brother.
you.
Thank you. Heather, you had your hand up. I sensed that you had, and
Well, I was just laughing when uh Julie was talking because I thought, of course, what happens is that we see the specialist, we say, oh, I know what that means. I think I already know how they're using it in the course. So of course I'd question, So because they want me to see it anew and they want it to arrest my attention to say, wait a second, why are they saying it like this now? So it's all about getting my attention and getting me out of the whole idea that I know and go back to sleep because I've seen this before. That whole idea that I need to become a child again and not act like I've seen this before.
that is so helpful, Heather. I hope everybody really got that. The feeling, I already know this, rather than the question, so what does that mean? What can I learn here? It's, and we all have that tendency. So if we see the word salvation, Richie said the other day it was God for him. They were touch words where our mind already is made up what that means. And so the learning process just stops because we've already got an answer. And that is what this is all about. And Heather used the analogy of being like a little child and saying, oh, what does that mean? Being open minded. That is really a big lesson there. Okay,
Like,
so
Jonathan, it's like, what does it mean in this context?
in this context,
Not in the context that I saw it in before.
yes,
Well,
it's a
that's
very.
why
Go ahead.
no, that's why I said I was able to see the distinction. Like I was using the word abilities
Right.
more so. Right, but it did catch my attention. That's all.
Yes,
It
it
did catch
does.
my attention, but I didn't go to sleep with it. It caught my attention to say, oh, they mean this differently.
Nice, nice. All right. Wow, we're off to a good, a rich start. And we'll go on to trust.
Trust. This is the foundation on which their ability to fulfill their function rests. Perception is the result of learning. In fact, perception is learning because cause and effect are never separated. The teachers of God have trust in the world because they have learned it is not governed by the laws the world made up. It is governed by a power that is in them, but not of them. It is this power that keeps all things safe. It is through this power that the teachers of God look on a forgiven world. When this power has once been experienced, it is impossible to trust one's own petty strength again. Who would attempt to fly with the tiny wings of a sparrow when the mighty power of an eagle has been given him? And who would place his faith in the shabby offerings of the ego when the gifts of God are laid before him? What is it that induces them to make the shift?
There's so much here. This is obviously two paragraphs combined into this slide. So much here, and I really recommend in your own time you go back and review this paragraph right here. So, what are we talking about? The foundation that allows a teacher of God, gives them, Susie used the word, the ability to fulfill their function. In order to fulfill the functions God would have you fill, there, he will use your abilities to, but and the foundation for everything that we will read in this section is trust. So then question, which comes first, perception or learning? Perception is the result of learning. You learn something. It can be true or it can be false. And then you look to validate what you already believe out in the world. That's what happens when we read A Course in Miracles with that, what we just went through a moment ago. I've already learned what specialness means, or I've already learned that to heal, you bring the dark, I should bring the dark into the light. I've learned it already. But what we find here is that we have often learned in formulas and definitions that are oftentimes like you can write them down, they should never change, like a dictionary. Whereas a growing mind, an open mind, is capable of perceiving from the level of a little child all the way to the level that a senior adult would perceive, and recognizes all those levels of perception in between and doesn't have any judgments one way or another against those different levels. So perception follows learning. And now we're going to talk about what I think is the most important point of all, of this entire manual. The teachers of God have trust in the world. Huh? They have trust in the world? Why? Because they've learned the world is not governed by the laws the world made up, The world is governed by a power that is in them, but not of them. And this power keeps all things safe. It's through this that the teachers of God can look on a forgiven world. So, a power. Oh, let's go on for a minute. To contrast the power that is in them but not of them, once you've experienced this spiritual power, it's impossible to trust one's own petty strength again. So now we've got a difference between the power of God and one's own petty strength. And a moment ago, Richie said, sometimes I feel like I have nothing to offer. Well, from the ego perspective and from a sense of our petty strength, it's true. There's nothing we can offer at the gate of heaven that stems from our petty strength. But there's everything we can offer when the power comes from God. That's what draws us back to the gates of heaven. So the power that is the teachers of God have learned that this world is governed by a power that is in them and not of them. And that's what allows them to look out with forgiveness, because they're safe inside this power. So we can talk with words as all night long about this, but it's an experience. It's a felt sense on the inner plane that there is something that we're going to label the power of God, the power of heaven, or label however you wish. There's something within you that is trustworthy, and that as that radiates out, it brings you safety. It brings you a sense of perceiving that you can trust the world. And no longer being afraid of the world. It allows you to look on the world with forgiveness. This is truly transformative. So right now we're just cracking the topic. There's a power within you that you have to learn to trust. Be aware that the world will encourage you to trust your own petty strength. That temptation will be there. And so we should ask, what is it that induces the teacher of God to make the shift from trusting one's petty strength to trusting the power of God within them? So, Heather, you had a comment? No more? No? Okay. All right. So, what is it? So, we're talking about a shift that each one of us faces perhaps multiple times. And the very foundation of it is, what power do we trust? Our petty strength, which would be the default mode of this world, would be to trust your petty strength. If you knew nothing else, that's what you would rely on. And now we're being told there's another power that is in us. So how do we develop this, David?
Development of trust. First, they must go through what might be called a period of undoing. This need not be painful, but it usually is so experienced. It seems as if things are being taken away, and it is rarely understood initially that their lack of value is merely being recognized. How can lack of value be perceived unless the perceiver is in a position where he must see things in a different light? He is not yet at a point at which he can make the shift entirely internally. And so the plan will sometimes call for changes in what seem to be external circumstances. These changes are always helpful. When the teacher of God has learned that much, he goes on to the second stage.
And we're going to walk through multiple stages here. Remember, we're talking about what is it that induces the teacher of God to make this shift. And there's stages we go through. Initially, we're not yet at a point in which we can make the shift internally in its entirety. Maybe you can talk the talk initially. Maybe you accept in your mind that there's a power, but you haven't made the internal shift entirely as yet. And so we go through these stages, and these are normal and natural. We should read this as if it applies to every one of us. And the first one being this period of undoing. And I could cite some examples here. So speaking more, let's say that my entire life I was believed that to be financially successful was to become that meant being good, making good use of your abilities, good use of your talents, driven to that attribute of financial success. One values these things, and then one later on realizes that there's a lot more to life than that, and that great amount of money does not make people happy. So changes will start to arise in your life that will start to allow you to see things differently. Sometimes there will be external circumstances will change, such as you lose your job or your business collapses. And the source for all that self-esteem, the way you saw yourself, is now gone. And this would seem by the world to be a tragedy, but yet it's an invitation to see yourself in a different light. The changes, this is one of the hardest lessons right here. The changes are always helpful. The ego hates change. The changes are always helpful. And when you've learned as much that the changes are always helpful, then you're ready to go on to the second stage. So as long as you're still fighting the changes that kept your old self intact, then as long as you're fighting to go back to what it was, you haven't learned to accept it as much. Learn these changes are helpful. Comments, Susie?
No, I just feel like we're going towards that one lesson. I cannot perceive my own best interests, and that a teacher of God truly trusts everything that happens in life. I cannot perceive my own best interest.
Yes. And when you've learned that, you really believe it, you kind of know it in your knower, then you're ready to go on to the next stage. Rich, you had a comment?
Yes. What I'm experiencing, I've been doing listening to tapes at night, Course in Miracles, and some of it is really good. And I come here, and what I thought I learned, you guys validated. And one of the things that bothered me all my life, since I was very young, was guilt and shame.
Yeah.
And with this, the more contact I make with this power, the less I'm carrying around the old baggage. It has its way of not disappearing, just dissipating.
Yeah.
But the power is not between my ears.
Right.
It's somewhere else. and it's so fulfilling, so nurturing, that I don't need a special diet. I don't need to wear a special pair of pants or shoes or speak in a way or whatever to compensate. And I'm not looking for anything.
Mhm.
And this is it was said that the only, I don't know, there was something I heard. It talked about in one fellowship, it talked about the disease.
So, Richie, let's stay focused on what we're doing right here.
Okay, for me to access this spirit, this holy, that's what I'm hearing,
Mhm.
is to learn to access this Holy Spirit. That's what
Yes.
I will
Yes.
find heaven.
Yes. Hmm.
And
Thank
I'm
you.
saying heavy words, I don't know,
Yes.
you know.
So that's what we're really talking about. So it begins with trust, and trust requires that first we be willing to undo the things that used to seem to be valuable. And once we learn that all the changes we go through are helpful, then we're ready for the second stage. There's, I think, 7 stages in here. David Welton has counted them up and memorized them. So let's go on to stage 2.
Next, the teacher of God must go through a period of sorting out. This is always somewhat difficult because, having learned that the changes in his life are always helpful, he must now decide all things on the basis of whether they increase the helpfulness or hamper it. He will find that many, if not most of the things he valued before, will merely hinder his ability to transfer what he has learned to new situations as they arise. Because he has valued what is really valueless, he will not generalize the lesson for fear of loss and sacrifice. It takes great learning to understand that all things, events, encounters, and circumstances are helpful. It is only to the extent to which they are helpful that any degree of reality should be accorded them in this world of illusion. The word value can apply to nothing else.
Mhm. So in this period of sorting out, some people could have experienced this as a crisis in values, or shifting from older value system to some unknown set of new values, which is a valuing helpfulness, what's helpful. I mean, the key word here is to value what is helpful, and realizing all the changes in your life are helpful, are geared towards being helpful. And many people will struggle with this because they're the huge investment in the values of the past now are called into question, and a new value system of how to be helpful is elevated to greater importance. And you move forward according to your willingness here. If you aren't ready or willing, then it won't happen. Or here's the one that gets me: I have to sacrifice my old values for the new value system. And then the motivation for it becomes based in fear of loss rather than gain. So this can be very tricky. As it says right here, it takes great learning to understand that no matter what happened, all these circumstances are helpful. The changes in life are always helpful. So it's a new point of view. You embrace the change as the very process that brings about new learning and growth. And that means even the change that you don't welcome. Like, for instance, if your car is stolen, very few people would applaud that circumstances, but your attitude, your belief towards it is that all things are helpful, even if you don't see it initially. So, and here's to go very deep here, having said all that about helpfulness. There's a line here, David Schneider, you might find this especially useful. It's only to the extent that things are helpful that we should give any degree of reality accorded to them in this world of illusion. Anything that is not helpful is a total illusion. It's a total meaningless thoughts show us a meaningless world. But to the extent that it's helpful, at least we can say that it's helping us move forward. It's helping us to learn and grow. The word value can apply to nothing else. And so we've got this new abstraction of what is valuable, that which is helpful, not only to yourself, it could be helpful to others as well. And pretty soon, the demarcations between what's helpful to you and what's helpful to me start to soften up and not be so rigid, so that we just think in terms of what's helpful to the sonship. What's helpful to one is helpful to all. Heather?
It seems like this idea of helpfulness can be used for so many things. Because the question that comes to me is, I can look at it from, does it increase the helpfulness or hamper the helpfulness of what? Well, I could apply it to anything. Does this increase or hamper my ability to learn my lessons? Because if this is something that's going to help me learn a lesson I need, then it's very helpful to me. I may not like it, but it's very helpful for me to learn the lesson. So I think this word helpfulness can be used for so many different areas, not just the big macro. It can be used in the micro. So we can look at all our experiences and go, oh my God, that was so awful and painful, but was it helpful for my soul to grow and learn? And I love that it says somewhere, it says that our life here is an education, not probation. That we're here to learn. We're not on probation here and have to get it right. So I just love the whole idea that what is it helpful for is the question that just really came up for me.
Thank you, Heather. So clear. Yes, it's at a level of abstraction where it's meant to be applicable to anything and everything. Yes, to be helpful. Susie?
I just have to love what Heather just said, because something painful in this world, in my life, is helpful for me to learn lots of things. If it's not joyful, making pain, and I love what she said, because anything is helpful.
Okay, so that's a key word now. And I find you can fairly easily train your mind to, whenever any situation comes up, you ask yourself, is this helpful? It's a simple question. Or how can this be helpful? Rather than
Jonica, the question is not really, is it helpful?
Yes.
It's how is it helpful?
How is it helpful? You're right. Thank you. That's more articulate for sure. Yes, because all change is helpful.
All experiences are helpful.
All experiences. Yes. Does it say experiences? I'm wondering. Okay. So is that?
It says all things, events, encounters, and circumstances.
Circumstances are helpful. And it takes great learning to understand that. Because we are wont to create a hierarchy of the things we like and the things we don't like. and put the things we don't like into the not helpful category, and take the things that we at least are okay with and put them into the helpful category. This abolishes all that. So that's more, we said this is a period of sorting out so that you begin to see all things, eventually see all things, events, encounters, and circumstances as helpful. Okay.
The third stage through which the teacher of God must go can be called a period of relinquishment. If this is interpreted as giving up the desirable, it will engender enormous conflict. Few teachers of God escape this distress entirely. There is, however, no point in sorting out the valuable from the valueless unless the next obvious step is taken. Therefore, the period of overlap is apt to be one in which the teacher of God feels called upon to sacrifice his own best interests on behalf of truth. He has not realized as yet how wholly impossible such a demand would be. He can learn this only as he actually does give up the valueless. Through this, he learns that where he anticipated grief, he finds a happy lightheartedness instead. Where he thought something was asked of him, he finds a gift bestowed on him.
So I know that you all this resonates with many of you. So here's a way to express it. Each of us has our favorite idols, our pet of the last things that we would want to lose, things we want to save. All of us have our pet idols, our favorites. And to give up that could be seen from the ego's point of view of sacrificing your own best interest. That would be the story based upon the ego's point of view. In the Holy Spirit's point of view, truth would never cause you to sacrifice anything that is of your best interest. And so there goes the workbook lesson that Susie, I think, mentioned it this evening. I do not perceive my own best interest. Therefore, hanging on to my idols, what I thought was in my best interest to hang on to my favorite idols are, in fact, I don't know what's in my best interest. And so it's impossible for me to actually give up anything that's valueless. Let's remember, these relinquishments can be difficult because the ego will see it as giving up what's desirable. And it says, few teachers of God escape this distress entirely. And it's not, yeah. So the idea is you'll go through this period. It's likely to overlap in one. So this is a loop of going back into the past and trying to hang on to the self that I made up that thinks I understand what's in my best interest and all the narrative that goes with it. So many of you have experienced this firsthand. I know you have because you've spoken about it. What Christoph said to me 6 months ago, it says, I feel like part of me is dying. It was just like it was just going away. It was just no longer alive in him. The things that he had valued for so long and put so much importance in were just like shedding rapidly. And so it can feel to the ego, it feels like you're dying. To the spirit, you're lightening your load so that you can be free to move forward. Susie?
I love this where it says, where he thought something was asked of him, he finds a gift bestowed on him. So, the ego wants to use that expression that we've also commonly heard. Oh my God, this is out of my comfort zone. And so the ego thinks something is being asked of him, but really, no, when I'm out there, what I thought was my comfort zone, it's not. I find a gift bestowed on me if I don't listen to that sentence of the ego or what we've been taught for so many years.
Mhm.
That saying, out of my comfort zone. It's so ego.
Mhm. Thank you. Heather? You're
I
muted.
love that. I love that, Susie. I love the idea that what we're doing is we're expanding our comfort zone. That's what's happening. Because as we trust more, we trust the inner guidance more, our comfort zone increases. Because a comfort doesn't come from ourself anymore. It comes from that being placed in situations where we can truly be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Indeed. Richie? Go ahead. Richie?
Yes, as we do this work, I was feeling discomfort. I was looking at things that I had been running away from all my life.
Mhm.
And as I experience that with the assistance of you guys, I feel a sense of freedom. I don't feel what I'm saying is contrived
Mhm.
in order to cover up the 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 negative feelings of the shame and all that stuff. So this is becoming the discomfort for me is changing into something that I've been waiting for all my life. I don't know if I can really put that in words, but it's like you can't see an infection go away, but
Mhm.
I know it's going away.
Mm. I like that. Thank you, brother. Okay, so thank goodness for the fourth stage, but the third stage, it can be like it says, few teachers escape the distress entirely. So there's this sorting out under this guidance now, what is helpful is valuable, and all the things that I may have wanted to be valuable, the things that I decided were important to me, are called into a new perspective. Then we move on, thank God, to the next stage.
Now comes a period of settling down. This is a quiet time in which the teacher of God rests a while in reasonable peace. Now he consolidates his learning. Now he begins to see the transfer value of what he has learned. Its potential is literally staggering. And the teacher of God is now at the point in his progress at which he sees in it his whole way out. Give up what you do not want and keep what you do. How simple is the obvious, and how easy to do. The teacher of God needs this period of respite. He has not yet come as far as he thinks. Yet when he is ready to go on, he goes with mighty companions beside him. Now he rests a while and gathers them before going on. He will not go on from here alone.
This reminds me when you're going up a long staircase where there's a landing, an intermediate landing along the way, and then you begin the next flight of stairs. So it's a period of a respite. I'm seeking to understand myself what consolidates his learning means. And so that's a question I'm asking help for. I do sense that it means your learning starts to apply to all different areas of life. There's what we call transfer value in what we've learned, so that the lesson that you might have had with regards to valuing money then transfers over to other things that were thought to be so valuable, and the learning goes quicker. There's a degree of integration of and this is the way the Holy Spirit works. She teaches lessons in ways that have broad applicability to your life, even though you may learn it in a specific situation, specific person and time. It's a lesson that then can be repurposed in other aspects of your life that you would not have thought are related initially. So a couple hands up. Heather?
Yeah, in psychology, they call that transfer of training. So we're
Really?
trained in a trained in a certain area, and then we are able to take that out and apply that same knowledge to other circumstances that may look totally different, but it's the value in the what we learned can be transferred. The training we learned before can be transferred into other situations that are different, but may have a component.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting because that's what it's called in the course as well. That's why I didn't know that they use those terms in psychology. Thank you, Heather. Susie?
Yeah, this was really deep for me because when I tore my rotator cuff and I learned, or I looked at it, how can I look at this differently? I cannot perceive my own best interest. And then I read about this period of respite, which is what I was forced into in this world. And I learned so much about that situation, which I could transfer into other things, how the excessiveness of the ego and all those excessive thoughts in my mind, what I was doing in yoga was really detrimental. And then I could apply that to so many other parts of my life, valuing the valueless, like everything that we're talking about. And I could see the potential of that situation, being able to apply that in so many other areas. And when I had all those months, I considered that part of my journey. And I could have looked at it from the ego's point of view, and been miserable, but I really didn't at all. And I think I did a lot of growing. And I don't know, that was the Holy Spirit's journey for me, but that was my journey that taught me a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I
Thank you.
could really see where this is applicable.
Mm-hmm. No, I can as well, especially when you relate it that way.
I love that what you just said, and I love the promise. Potential is literally staggering. That's pretty remarkable, they're implying that this could be revolutionary.
Hmm. And now he sees a point at which he sees his whole way out. Pretty amazing. David, your comment?
I just, what's jumping out at me, and I could be off base, and I really appreciate any comment, but it's like climbing up the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
And the period of respite is, when you climb in a mountain, for example, at some point you got to sit down and say, that's why they have the break on Everest, base camp. So this is like base camp, where you sit down and you consolidate your learning. We've climbed up half this mountain, half this ladder, and we're going to consolidate what we've learned here, and, give up what you do not want, keep what you do, because going the rest of the way, you can't be bringing stuff you don't want or isn't helpful. And now the question that I have is, the mighty companions beside him. Are we referring to our brothers? Are we referring to the Holy Spirit?
So it's the right question, David. And people might come up with different interpretations. I choose to believe it's both the companions you can see in the flesh, your brothers, as well as the companions you cannot see, the angels, of which, of course, mentions about a half a dozen times. The angels are cheering you on. As after all, we're talking about the point of progress in which you can see his whole way out. The We're not in this alone. And so the angels can be viewed as the hands and feet of the Holy Spirit here in this time-based environment. So I would say yes, mighty companions are those both seen and unseen, both. And they're companions because they're people that are willing to join with you in this journey. They're people that you can say, hey, I want to be helpful here. Oh, great, really glad to have you join. So they take many forms. Having said all that, I don't think it's detailed any further in a course. I don't think that there's an elaboration. Like many things, as you say, it's very pithy. Very few, so it leads one to have your internal teacher explain to you the meaning. Okay, so now we've had a chance to settle down. Well, I wonder what comes next. David?
The next stage is indeed a period of unsettling. Now must the teacher of God understand that he did not really know what was valuable and what was valueless. All that he really learned so far was that he did not want the valueless and that he did want the valuable. Yet his own sorting out was meaningless in teaching him the difference. The idea of sacrifice, so central to his own thought system, had made it impossible for him to judge. He thought he learned willingness, but now he sees that he does not know what the willingness is for. And now he must attain a state that may remain impossible to reach for a long, long time. He must learn to lay all judgment aside and ask only what he really wants in every circumstance. Were not each step in this direction so heavily reinforced, it would be hard indeed.
So we're on the fifth stage of being the teacher of God. And now I realize he doesn't really know what's valuable. All he for in other words, his whole sorting process is not, was just his own efforts to decide what was valuable and not valuable. It was meaningless in teaching him the difference. We're back. It feels like in one set, okay, in my experience of this, I often feel like I'm back at square one. Truth is, we're not going back to the beginning, but it all of a sudden feels like, as Heather said, like I'm a little child learning in the first grade again, because I had all these other notions in my head, and now I realize that it's impossible to judge. It's not here's what I would say is the simple truth. These are not questions of my judgment and your judgment. And to the extent that we still want to become the arbiter, the judge of what matters and doesn't matter, what's valuable and not matters, we're still fooling ourselves that it's our own our ego guide is going to carry us forward. Now he sees he does not know what the willingness is for. It's a reset for sure. It's a realizing that the truth is much simpler than all that my thought. And so this state may remain impossible for him to reach for a long, long time, meaning he can't complete the stage. And when it says to complete the stage, he must learn to lay all judgment aside. That's a high bar, because that means the voice of judgment from the ego doesn't mean you never hear it. It means you lay it aside when you hear it, all judgment aside. And then in every circumstance, you ask only for what really matters in every circumstance. So we're pretty far up on the ladder there, and yet it's a realization that I do not know what anything's for. I need to ask is still the fundamental truth. Simon, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it brought me to memory a chapter that especially marked me when I read the text. It's chapter 30, the new beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And this two phrases that I think apply to this. One says, "Today I will make no decisions by myself."
Mm-hmm.
And then further along it says, "If I make no decisions by myself, this is the day that will be given me." Obviously, you're kind of asking to have a productive, beneficial, whatever day. Yeah. So I think they two join at this point. I mean, with this reading and this chapter.
Yeah. It's a really good tie in there. Yes. And to let each day be that way where we are asking and asking. It's somewhat mirrored in the conversation we had earlier where we already thought we knew what the course had to say about these things. And so we had already learned a definition that we carried around in memory. And then when the reading comes along, instead of approaching it like a fresh mind, we approach it of we've already learned that. And so it's similar here. You have to lay all judgment aside and ask for, in every circumstance, for Holy Spirit guidance. And so requires great learning. And we've got some other comments. Julie S., you had your hand up?
Yeah, it's so interesting that the whole thing about not knowing in the initial stages, it's kind of okay, and it's kind of comforting. I don't know what anything is for, and I don't know what this means, and this and that. But our feet are really held to the fire here, because it has to be consistent. It has to be always, I do not know, and fill in the blank. And that's the part I think that it's getting at here, is that, we're trying to sort out, but we still have these ideas of sacrifice, and we have all of that going on. and we constantly have to go back to, I don't know. And that's really, I think that's really a hard thing in all circumstances. And that's exactly what laying judgment aside is about, is really doing that. And we've talked about this many times on this class about how, you know, how do we gauge where we are? And the question to ask is, how do I feel? And that will be telling us every time.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Julie. And let's remember, this is all about, what are you trusting? Whose guidance are you trusting? Are you trusting the guidance of your own judgment, your own, what did they call it earlier about the power, your own little feeble power? I'm not getting the words right. Your own weakness? Or are you trusting a power that is in you, not of you, and asking that for God? So it is about trust. Susie.
No, I was just going to echo what Simon said, because what came up for me totally was the rules of decision that we read about, you know, which is exactly that. You know, what am I supposed to do in every single situation? This is what it says. So anyway, the rules for decision came up for me,
Yeah.
which is basically.
Yeah. Way to go, Simon. Heather?
Yeah, I'm just really I can't get over what David shared about the idea of we're going up the mountain, because I just, that's so applicable. I just see this whole lesson in that now, and that we come to those plateaus, and then we go on with our mighty companions. Well, they're the ones that help us sort through the what we have left to make it to the top of the mountain, and they help us get rid of what we don't need, because it's going to just hinder us from reaching the top. I just, it's so brilliant, David. I just got the whole picture when you said that. The higher we climb, the less we need, because it takes too much effort to carry it with us. So we need these mighty companions to help pare down all this stuff we thought we needed that we don't, because as we get further and further away, all that stuff baggage we brought with us, we thought we were going to need on the higher levels, we don't need. And they're there to help us say, you don't need this, my friend. You leave this one aside. And as you keep going up the mountain, you're going to need less and less, and you're going to trust us. That's why we're the mighty companions, and we're going to tell you what you need for the rest of the journey. So thank you. That just is brilliant. You opened that whole thing up for me.
Nice. Don't you love it when that happens? Okay, so we're talking about a situation where the teacher of God must attain this state, and sometimes it can last a long time to lay all judgment aside. I hear echoes of approaching the last judgment, the final judgment, where you lay all judgment aside, and that is very high up on the mountain, and you would expect that after that you're reaching a summit, a pinnacle. David?
And finally, there's a period of achievement. It is here that learning is consolidated. Now, what was seen as merely shadows before becomes solid gains, to be counted on in all emergencies as well as tranquil times. Indeed, the tranquility is their result, the outcome of honest learning, consistency of thought, and full transfer. This is the stage of real peace, for here is heaven's state fully reflected. From here, the way to heaven is open and easy. In fact, it is here. Who would go anywhere if peace of mind is already complete? And who would seek to change tranquility for something more desirable? What could be more desirable than this?
So this is true consolidation of learning, true transfer of training. This is the period of grace, where the light of grace, one lives in the light of grace. It's described as tranquility. It's defined as a stage of real peace, of heaven's state. It's not that you're in heaven, it's that it's reflected here in time and space. Heaven's light is reflected here in time and space. That's the light of grace. This is when miracles happen consistently and easily. This is when the teacher of God is fully functioning because he's now at peace. He's now the training, it transfers into all the different areas. As it says, heaven is still ahead, but the way is open and easy. In fact, heaven comes down to earth. The light of heaven comes down to earth. There's no need to go elsewhere because the light is here, the peace is here. Why would you want to go elsewhere when you're in tranquility and peace in the light of grace? So this is truly top of the ladder. Still on the ladder. Still haven't gotten off the ladder entered into the gates of heaven, but the light is there completely. Heather?
This is where miracles become natural.
Yes.
They're just part, this is where we are. They are now. You expect it because this is just the stage that you're at. It's consistent. It's solid ground. It becomes just the natural way of doing things now.
Yes. And said in the negative, there's no barriers to miracles anymore. You might remember when this goes back a ways, but miracles come from deep below in the subconscious mind. They initiate the impulse to be helpful, initiates, but when the superficial subconscious has all this clutter and all this nonsense of what's important and meaningful and self-concepts there, the impulses of the miracles can't make it, they won't fight their way through there. They don't make it in the conscious mind. Here, the superficial subconscious has been cleared out because that which is of no value is no longer occupies the attention of the person. They've gone through all that sorting. And so miracles they have always been percolating naturally within you, but now there's no obstacles, there's no barriers, there's no fear. It's a stage of real peace. And so the mind now is in harmony with miracles because judgment and fear and all those obstacles are gone. And so, yes, this is what. Now, when we read in later sections, how many sons of God does it take to change the world? The answer given in the course is one. And we're talking about the one that is in this state. Miracles are consistent and natural. And so this would be for all of us. You wouldn't be in this class if you were walking around in this state because you'd be out there performing miracles constantly. Think of this as the vision the Holy Spirit has for you, and she would have you do this in time while still here in the flesh, because your brothers and sisters and the humanity needs miracle workers to be helpful in whatever circumstance there are. This is a state of complete abundance. Okay, so that was amazing.
I just have one more comment, Jonathan. I think it's so funny that they put emergencies in quotes. Like it's a joke now. There's not going to be any emergencies. Like what we used to think was an emergency is no longer an issue.
Right, right. Yeah, you're right. Like a flat tire, or my credit card got scammed and I have to replace it, or whatever it might be, is no longer emergencies.
David, your sunglasses.
Or your
Thanks,
sunglasses
Susie.
are lost. So I think we won't go on in our reading tonight. That was a good night. That was a full meal of trust. But as you look at this final image here, just think what it takes to make the leap there. And remember that what we read earlier, because we have been talking about trust, is the teachers of God actually trust in the world. It's they have trust from within them. Their trust doesn't come from without. They've learned that the world itself is governed by a power in them, but that is transcendent of them as an individual. It's a shared power. It's the power to create love. It's the power of God within you. It's a power in you, but not of you. And that then radiates out into the world and allows the teacher of God to feel trust in any circumstances, including the things we used to label emergencies, as well as the things that we think of as tranquil times. So, what an amazing deep dive into the stages that one goes through, basically just to empty out all your fears and your guilt and your judgments and all that stuff that is of no value and of no help, to empty all that stuff out so that one can just truly function as God created you, to be helpful, to bring good in, to bring the light of grace to this world.
That photo and the topic that we've discussed tonight, and it's about trust, reminds me of a joke, if I may tell it.
Sure.
A man is walking near the edge of a cliff, and there's a slight earthquake, where the ground crumbles and the ground underneath him gives way, and he starts falling down into the canyon, and he grabs a branch with one hand, and he's hanging by that branch thousands of feet above the canyon floor, and he doesn't know what to do, and he says, "Is there anybody up there that can help me?" And he hears this voice. The voice says, "Let go of the branch." And the guy looks down. He doesn't see him. He says, "Who is that that's saying that?" And then the voice says, "It is God. Let go of the branch." And the guy goes, "Is there anybody else up there?"
I want a second opinion. That's funny.
I want to thank Heather for pointing out that the emergencies, were in air quotes like that, because those things have come to be things that I'll say, like, this is not an emergency. You know what I mean? This is not an emergency. And I love that when I can take something like that from the course, because I kind of miss that. And I love that now. I have so many emergencies.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, that's a very good note to bring a lovely evening together. Thank you for all that you contribute and for your interest in this and the sharing of this vision of reaching a state of grace. That is the foundation of trust. I mean, we go through the other attributes. It comes back to this trusting that the power within you to ask for that rather than trusting in the voice of the ego. It all is founded on that, and we all grow together in that process. So we'll cover honesty and many of the other attributes starting next weekend. I want to thank Brother David for reading. Thank all of you for your comments and contributions and for your enthusiasm. And look forward to next time. Namaste.
Namaste, everybody.
Love
Have a
you
great
all.
week, guys.
Namaste. Thank
Thank you.
you,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Night.